Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Market Psychology 101, where we look for value in the markets when there's fear and are cautious when there's greed. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Bitcoin rainbow chart and some things that we've seen in the past that might possibly be giving us signs of what we might notice in the future. So, for those of you who are new to Bitcoin and are not really too familiar with the Bitcoin rainbow chart, maybe you've seen it before. What's important to know is that the chart is on a logarithmic scale. So as you can see here, it goes up by factors of 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000. So if I were to pull up Bitcoin's chart and I clicked all here, and yes, there's a lot of lines. I'll get to what those are in a second because this does have to do with what we're talking about today. If I take it off log, you'll notice the price spikes up higher. So each time we go into a cycle, our price tends to run up insanely higher than before. Going back to the rainbow chart, when we put it on log scale is a better way to look at markets from a macro perspective. So on this channel, I try to make it more stress-free and friendly for the new low to medium risk style investors, not really traders, but just look for times that we can enter the markets at lower risk and be patient and take out profits when we are running to new all-time highs. So I do look for those areas of when it might possibly be better to get into certain assets, stocks, and crypto. But for Bitcoin today, we're just going to be taking a look at this rainbow chart and seeing, is there anything that we can make from this? So one of the first things I hope you notice is just with these halvings down here. We've had 4 halvings, and something I hope you notice is how we have these occasional peaks. And aside from the peak here to here, we can even go to that first one here, December of 2010. This peak was about 3 years after here, or you could really say 2.5 years after that ultimate peak. So it was about in the middle of 2011, and here the peak in this cycle was at the end of 2013. So let's just say 2.5 years. Here's the important thing to notice, though, and a lot of people talk about what a 4-year cycle is. From that peak to this one was about 4 years. From this peak to here was about 4 years. Now, something you'll notice is that we ran up here. The overall price of Bitcoin was higher here. The overall price got near or around 69,000. Here is around 64,000. However, I will say that in this area here, this was the COVID crash right down here. That's what that little dip was. And after that, we had quantitative easing, stimulus checks being thrown into the markets. We had 5-6 trillion printed out of thin air. That's why we still have inflation problems to this day and recession starting because of it around the world. So most of the damage in crypto was done right here. So there's 2 main camps out there. Some people thinking that we are now in a 4-year cycle from here, and some thinking that we are in a 4-year cycle from here. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing you'll notice are the 4 halvings, and that the next halving is coming up very soon. It's supposed to be happening around April 22nd, which is just a little bit right of where this is. And when we know that it's happening April 22nd, what we can look at then is where, in what price range, we have the still cheap, accumulate, buy, fire sale. What price range was the price in before? Well, you might already notice the pattern. The first halving, we were in this fire sale zone. Second halving, we got into the buy zone. Third halving, we got into the accumulate zone. Fourth halving, or is it fair to say we'll be in the still cheap zone, which by the 22nd, which is when the halving's supposed to be, it's that fourth box from the bottom, the green one says around 52.5 to 68.6. Shout out blockchaincenter.net, not sponsored. They have a great site though. So remember where those prices were. It was between, let's give this a second here while it loads up. I guess we got to refresh it. I've overloaded my computer with with all this charting. Okay, we're going over to Bitcoin. And again, going back to here, we said 52 is around 52.5 to, we have to move over one more. There we go. 52.5 to 68.6. Okay, where does that leave us? Well, I drew a fib, that's the Fibonacci scale here, from the high to the low, from the very, very high to the very low. I try to get those lines as close as I could. And 52.5 is pretty much right where we're at right now, actually. When did we get there? Within the last 5 days, you can see, okay, we got up to 53 almost. And maybe we got like a 52.999. So not too much further up. 52.5 right around here, okay? To 69 or around there is pretty dang close to where we were at our previous high, okay? So with that being said, if we are in that zone, we can expect to be somewhere between where we are now and near the all-time highs of the last cycle. Okay, what else can we take from that? Well, something else I've noticed is that the halving year goes up about half the amount each cycle. And so what is the halving? For those of you who don't know, and I'm going to try to simplify this as much as I can, the halving cycle, every time we have it, half the amount of Bitcoin is printed. And so there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin, which makes it non-inflationary. That's why people compare it to digital gold. And so when you create a supply crunch, that's something that can drive a profit. And I don't think it's any mistake that after each halving, the price does go a bit higher. So in that first halving year, and I'm talking about January 1st to December 31st, we went up 250%. I've mapped this out in other videos. You're just going to have to trust me, bro, on this. During the halving year, also the election year, we went up 250%. The next halving, and those white lines, by the way, that was the halving. The next halving, we went up 130%. And so immediately I thought, and the first time I did this, I was saying to myself, well, that's about half the amount as before. When I measured out from January 1st of 2016, so somewhere in here, to December 31st of 2016, we went up 130%. Okay. And then, so I went into the next halving, looking to measure out, well, am I going to see something around 60 to 70%? And sure enough, I did. I have here halving year went up 65%. And then I have an asterisk around QE. That means quantitative easing. Okay, so the halving year was 2020. And let's try to find January 1st, it's 2020. So it's right down here at this lower corner. And we were in a 65% range. I'll measure that out for you. We were in a 65% range or about there. You can see that right there until we broke it. So, and it's really at that next fib line, the 0.5. If you see it way over here, that's the 0.5 fib. I drew a fib for each previous cycle from the high and low. But look at that. We were at 65% at least until October. And guys, by that time, stimulus checks were hitting the market. People had extra money. That's why the prices of everything went up, from your housing to cars, everything, your groceries. Pricing has gone up for literally everything because basically 5-6 trillion was printed out of thin air. And so that devalues our current currency and has a natural way to drive up prices. And also, with all that extra money, that was being put in markets to pump. And I do believe that's why we had an early top. We can never truly know. But I do wonder is if we didn't have COVID and all the stimulus checks coming after, if this would have been the peak anyways, but we wouldn't have had this violent upsurge early on. Maybe it would have went down and then up again. Who's to say? But overall, we went up 65%. Let me get back to my point here. Me and my squirrel brain. And then the next halving, what I've thought of is, well, what if we go up 33%? And I've mapped it out from where January 1st was. You can see the dates at the bottom when I scroll over here. That's around January 1st. Where it was at 42.2. And so I thought, well, if we go up half the amount each halving year, again, that's reflected on this logarithmic scale. Here are the halvings. If we go up and make half the height of the move, then this is the peak of it, which coincidentally is right on that fib. Let me get rid of this buy sell signal indicator. Sorry about that. Which is on this 236 fib at 56.4. It's a touch below it, but we can have some leeway. 55, 56, whatever. It's right there. And so I've wondered, is that going to be the top, at least immediately? Because what happened last time is we peaked 6 months about after the bottom, and then we chopped around for a year. But again, remember, we only, from the start of the year to the end, we had 65%. So I'm going to start throwing in other variables here too. And the reason I have these fib ranges drawn up is to show you that the peak price after the high and low has moved up in this fib range each cycle. So again, we have our high, and I can see a little bits above there. I know it's not perfect. Our low, where did the price peak before the halving? That's this white line. It peaked right here. Now, if you just look at this without a fib, you don't really think anything of it. However, another pattern starts to emerge, is that we are right underneath this 0.5 fib. What happens the next time? So we get our high to low, and the very peak, it was very close to the halving, was over the 0.5 fib, almost to the 382 on the Fibonacci scale. Okay, let's move on. I first got into crypto 2017. After that sell-off, man, it was huge. But our last peak before the halving at the white line got above the 382 fib level. Okay, knowing that, then I wondered, well, where's the peak of Bitcoin price going to be this time around before the halving? We've been below the 0.5. We were almost to the 382. You can see that there, almost to the 382. Then we got just above the 382. Maybe we're going to the 236. Where's the 236? Well, gee golly willikers, that's right up here at the top of our expected halving range, where we go up half the amount each time. And that also falls in line in our overall range on this Bitcoin rainbow chart, the 52.5 to 69,000, roughly speaking. And so that's why I've drawn this ugly squiggly line here, because I'm wondering if maybe up until the halving we have a peak close to the halving, possibly go down and then shoot up. That's just a guess. It doesn't have to happen that way, because we've seen that happen before. As you can see here, how close was this peak to the halving? So this was June 19th, and the halving was, just a couple weeks later. So are we going to see the peak of Bitcoin price in early April? Because the halving is expected to be April 22nd. Might we see the peak sometime late March, early April in here? Maybe. Guys, again, when I'm talking about patterns here, they're only good for as long as they're good for. I say the same thing about trend lines. Trend lines are only good as long as they're good for. You can see this one down here. Boom, we hit it 3 times. Okay, and then it's no longer good anymore. This trend line I've drawn, the price of Bitcoin keeps smacking it, running into it, riding up it, going away, coming under, riding up it again. Are we possibly coming back down to this trend line to maybe break underneath it for a while post-halving? Might the halving be a sell the news event? I do wonder about that, because recently we pumped into the ETF approval. And if you guys don't remember when the ETF was, well, I can tell you, it's right here. We peaked and got up to 49,000. So when the Bitcoin ETF was approved, which means that places like Vanguard, BlackRock, and others could have Bitcoin as part of their stock portfolios, when that got approved, everyone was excited, and it was a sell the news event, at least for a little bit. And then, as you can see, obviously, we've pumped above that 49K. and are currently a little bit over 52,000. So the price of Bitcoin leading up into the halving was pretty strong. Or not the halving, sorry. The ETF was pretty strong. And then we sold off. So, of course, we're more than likely going to get some chop until then. Anytime price is up at a yearly high, I myself personally do not like to buy in because that is a higher risk time. We don't know if it's going to correct. I rather buy an asset when it dips 21% if it's something I like. And Bitcoin has done this a lot, by the way. From its peaks, it has dipped around 20%. Look at this peak. It has dipped around 20% from this peak. Noticing a pattern here? It has dipped around 22%. I'm curious about this little one. I'm sure it's a little bit, probably half as much. 12%. So overall, our smallest dip, even though you could say this is all one big move, has been 12%. But otherwise, we've had roughly 20% for 1, 2, 3, 4 dips. And so as we get up to this range on the Bitcoin rainbow chart, maybe we get the top of this. Okay, maybe we get to around 56K. Well, if we dip around 20%, that takes us back down to 44.2. And if you look where 44.2 is, we have a lot of structure here. So that wouldn't surprise me. Sometimes as we get up a bit higher, it's more unbelievable to think that we could go back down in price. Another thing to be aware of is where we're at on the RSI, the Relative Strength Index. We're overbought. We're overbought. We're either overbought at the mid cycles or when we're completing the bull run of a 4-year cycle. Mid cycle top, look at this, completing the 4-year cycle. Now this one, 2017, my God, we got up. Look, we never got to 50 again. The lowest we got in 2016, 2017 was 55. You can see we had it back there too. So there was something to tell us that, okay, at least this level on the RSI was as low as we're going to get. But man, we ran up hard there. Very overbought into the breakout. Here it went down to the 50. So mid-cycle to the blow-off top, that's when we're overbought. We do have more dips lower down as we have the sell-offs from the top. And I'd say even around the mid-cycle top because Bitcoin is becoming, how do I put this? Less volatile. So what I mean by that, let's go back to the rainbow chart. Here, the price of Bitcoin, you could make a 80x if you got the very bottom and top. Here, 6,000 to 15,000. Did I see that right? No, sorry. I have to look at the lower one. 600 to 15,000. That's like a 24x, something like that. And then last time, if you got the lows, let's just say, well, let's go by the halving. Heck, why not? Around 6,000 to 69,000, like a 10, 11x. So 80x, let's just say 20x, 10x. Are we now maybe going to see something like a 4 or 5x? Well, that would make sense. On the rainbow chart, if you do believe in the 4-year cycle, that every 4 years we peak, let's just go 4 years from April of 21 and November of 21. So that'd be April 25 and November of 25. And we'll be conservative. You do notice how the peak is in this red zone, lower in the red zone, high up in the second red band. Let's just go to the upper part of the orange band. We'll say what the upper part of the orange range is. That's the third box down. I'm going to go to April. This expects that in April, that orange box, I'm just in the middle of April, around 158,000 to 204,000 for Bitcoin. should you believe the 4-year cycle is earlier. And guys, if you want to get into crypto, you can't make profits unless you have skin in the game. So I do look for times, good times to buy, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, other altcoins. However, the more time you have in the markets, the more you can benefit from achieving higher value. I caution you on, if this is your first day in crypto and you're looking to get in now and not miss, I do encourage people on this channel to be patient and to wait for the right opportunity. That way we can see that technical structure and other factors support that decision. Let's go to November. Where is the orange in mid-November of 25? Well, that's around 188,000 to 241. So this is just me. Some people disagree with me. I don't understand why. I rather have the 4-year cycle peak later in 2025 instead of earlier. Part of the reason why is there's a lot of talks of recessions. There's a lot on the charts to show that we are getting into somewhat of a bubble. And I rather that bubble pop sooner than later for them to ease rates and for us to start benefiting from it by the end of 2025. That way we can have an opportunity to buy the dip, dollar cost average in. And to me, in my opinion, it'd be a lot harder to chase the pumps if we were just steadily going up through April of 2025. If we just steadily went up, and I just watch my mouse cursor, but if we just slowly crawled up, kind of like in 2017, but think more gradual instead of this curve motion, more of a straight line. If we went up in more of just a 45-degree angle to that price, that would make it very hard to get in because we would only see 20, maybe at best 30% dips. And I know that sounds like a lot. Crypto tends to be much more volatile. Tends to be, at least it has in the past. So I'm hoping for a peak later on. As far as anything else, I think I overall covered everything I wanted to show you with the Bitcoin rainbow chart. Guys, I don't want to get into the business of making predictions because it's an easy way to look like an idiot. And I know I've already talked about what some of the past prices of Bitcoin and patterns has shown us what it might do. We don't know if it's going to do this. By the halving, who knows? We may be making new all-time highs. And if so, then maybe this 33% range, we can throw that out the window. Okay, data points are only good for as long as they're good for. And remember, I have this asterisk here. We were at 65% until we weren't. And so that data point is somewhat invalidated. And if that were to happen again this year, well, then that's 50-50 and really this didn't matter at all. Now, let's say we go up and we do end up finishing within that 33% range. Okay, we can revisit that. And then for the fifth halving, you can say, hey, this is going to end up somewhere around 17% up from its January 1st price. They're just patterns, but I don't want to get in the business of saying, you know what, I think Bitcoin has to do one of these. I don't know. We've only had 20% corrections. I do think 20% corrections, when they get there, if they get to the fib ranges, present an opportunity to dollar cost average in when you're there. However, when you look at altcoins, sometimes I'm just going to go over a couple here. I'm putting on a buy-sell indicator on the weekly. Sometimes these can present a nice buy opportunity even if we don't have a 20% drop in Bitcoin. As you can see, there's lots of opportunities here. Chainlink ranged around. IMX went down for a little bit longer. We got a buy signal. Would have been a good time to get in. Okay, so every altcoin moves at their own rate. Do your own research on altcoins. Those are much more risky, and they also present much more upside as far as value you can get from your investment. And not financial advice. Sure, you could have bought Bitcoin back here, held on, and had a lot of money right now. If you are good about buying in when there's low risk and when we're in the lower parts of these ranges, if you feel you're good at that, then buying when we get up here near these tops when greed is blasting through the roof, and we haven't even looked at fear and greed yet. We're in extreme greed right now. Here's something to know. We haven't been at this level of greed since the very top of Bitcoin, which was November of 21. November of 21 was when we were at the very top. We have not been at that greed level since then. November 21. That was the very top. You might see that little green wick there. You can see it's a little line there. And yes, it is indeed above there. So our greed is as high as it's been since back here. I would be very cautious on buying in. Bitcoin's gone up for 4 weeks from a weekly buy signal. So me personally, I would be patient. Sure, it might run up to 56. And then it might have another 20% drawdown. And a 20% drawdown, where does that put us? That puts us underneath this fib, this 382 fib, and above this structure here that was above the 0.5. So if it got back down there, maybe a good time to start dollar cost averaging in. But again, we don't know when a reversal is going to happen. If we are going to get a mid-cycle reversal like we did last time, or if, like the time before, we're just going to go straight up pretty much. And if we were to have that, let's just take a look at these moves. I'll go to the yearly so we can be more accurate in measuring. So after the halving here, I'm going to try to move in. And I think I'll leave the video after this. After the halving there, you can see 30% drop, 40% drop. Again, each cycle gets a little bit less volatile overall. 33% drop. You'd say 33%. Yep. 30. So 30% tended to be the good range to buy. For us currently, it's about 20%. You can say, yep, 30%, 38%, if you measure that out completely. 40%. Yeah, it's like 30 to 40% each move. Around 30%. So that was what we had last time. Or not last time. 2 halvings ago. Last halving, might as well map this out so we're consistent. You can see after that peak, we had some pretty big moves down. Let's go till after COVID. So here's COVID. I know there's little moves in there. That's a tiny one. 13%. 21%. Here we're breaking all-time highs. We tested the all-time high, came down 17%, then we went back up. Got stuck there for a week. I'm not going to measure that. Here we're near the top. 30%. This would have been the very last time to buy. And then we're at this peak. Really, this is just me. I'm not buying when we break all-time highs. Anytime Bitcoin's above all-time highs, I'm not buying any Bitcoin. And if I'm buying any altcoins, they can't be ones that already broke their all-time high. They have to be ones still sitting underneath their lows. Or at least altcoins that haven't already gone up 10x from their bottom. That's how I would approach it. If an altcoin has already gone up 5, 10x and Bitcoin's an all-time high region, I'm not touching that altcoin. Now, that does create a problem because then you have to start hunting for altcoins. And I do go over altcoins available on Coinbase and Robinhood. And you start hunting for altcoins that become more risky, that may or may not pump, that may just rug. However, something to note is with the last 2 cycles I've been through, you have about 3 to 6 months where some of these altcoins, they go up 2 or 3 pumps, and from the time you get in, like I'm talking about back here before we break our all-time highs, if you stay in from in this area to when Bitcoin tops, and I know it's hard to predict when Bitcoin will top, there's a couple different ways to look at that, and I'll show you that here in a second and close this out. If you hold it, you can get a 10, 20, sometimes a 50x if you're lucky. As far as Bitcoin tops, how can you tell? Well, I'll show you some factors. Rainbow chart, here's one. Have an exit plan when it's in these ranges. Maybe exit out portions at a time as it gets in these zones, or a percentage at a time. So maybe you think, well, if it's in the yellow zone, I take out 10%. If it's in the orange zones, I take out 20%. If it's in the red zones, do whatever you want. You can look at the fear and greed index. Again, maybe you're looking for greed to be up near the high for a while. Here's something important to note, though. We topped in May of 21, April, May. So we peaked in greed, but then we went down a little bit. And then this was a true top, but this was a better time to buy. Okay. This was greed for the mid-cycle top. So it's just another factor. Last one. Well, a couple more. You can turn on monthly for buy-sell signals. And when we're getting monthly sell signals after a peak, you better be out by then. Weekly and monthly. I will say by this time, it's usually a little bit too late. A lot of alts have already sold off a ton. One that I like a lot is the Pi cycle Bitcoin high-low. This has been almost completely correct. We had a false top here, Pi cycle high. This was, again, right after the first halving. But the high marked the top, the low marked the low. The high marked the top, the low marked the low. The Pi cycle high, it is on here. Why is it not showing up? Do I have to go to 5? There we go. Guess I had to go to weekly. Did mark the high, and the low almost marked the low. But over here, that was pretty much the low too, this whole range. So do be on the lookout for the Pi cycle high. It's a pretty good indicator to have and to use as well. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this Bitcoin rainbow chart video, that you learned a couple things. If you have any altcoins or stocks that you would like for me to look at, please comment those below. Again, what I'm trying to do with this channel is help the medium to low risk or new investor that wants investing into stocks and crypto to be less stressful. And I think I have some ways to help people look at that and know that whether or not you're buying at a more risky time or a less risky time. I'll be honest with you about it. I leave the research of the assets up to you because there's too many for one person to do. If there's an asset you like or a crypto you like and you want me to take a look at the technicals of it, I will, and I'll give you my honest opinion. So even if it was just Bitcoin, we're at a yearly high. If I click the 1 year or the daily, the last year we're at a yearly high, I wouldn't be buying Bitcoin here. Me personally. Maybe you will, because you're like, well, you just said it, get the 200,000. Why not? Okay, you might do that. And it's very possible that we might get a 20-ish% pullback and you could have gotten a little bit better value. So that's all I'm saying. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope the beginning of your week is going well. Hope you all take care, make some money, and yeah, have a good day. Bye-bye.